So I talked about how guitars work, but now one of you guys asked about the amp. So there are three main types of amps. There's the tube amp, the solid state, and the modeled. Now, modeled amps are essentially just solid states with a bunch of presets on it, so they're essentially the same thing as the solid state. So we're just going to talk about two of them. Now, you will see a lot of familiar devices, so if you're not familiar with my channel or exactly what we've talked about so far, go ahead and watch my last three videos. Now, drawn up here, I have a partial schematic just so you guys know the steps of exactly how a tube amp works in the first place. So first you get your power source, which will come in usually somewhere between 10, 15, all the way up to 100 watts, depending on how much extra power you put into it, which actually combines with your AC signal from your guitar, as explained in my last video. Now, when these two get combined, you now get a phase diagram that goes into the tube that looks something like this. A constant DC negative from the power source with some disruptions after combining with the guitar AC. Now, when it picks this up, it will go through this grid, which will split this up and create a three-dimensional cloud of floating electrons. This will eventually go into a transformer where these small signals here will actually be amplified, and that will give it enough power to drive the speaker from the cabinet. Now, eventually, as technology progresses, things get a lot simpler, and we use transistors and integrated circuits a lot more. So now we could just take this signal and just straight up amplify it directly. So now we have our guitar signal, and just by adding some power to an integrated circuit, we can now take that signal and set it to whatever amplitude we want before we set it to the speakers. This super simple system is called solid state. So why do tube amps sound so different from solid state amps then? In a tube amp, the electrons come out of the cathode and will eventually reach the anode, being regulated into a cloud from the grid. Now, essentially what this will do is it will take all the electrons and it will just spread them around in a cloud, where it's only disrupted by the guitar signal itself. And this has some inconsistencies. So I talked a little bit in my last video about distortion, and the way that a solid state amp does that is that it will take an amplitude and just clip it by that amplitude, which leaves you with almost like the square-ish wave that will create distortion. But tube amps aren't so sharp with it though. So because you're just moving electrons throughout this 3D space essentially, what it will end up doing to the end of the signal is that it will kind of round out the clipping a little bit. So it'll sound a little bit smoother, which is why tube amps are often described to kind of have a really smooth yet aggressive distortion at the same time, which is really nice. And that's how an amp works. And if you're curious about anything else, leave a comment and follow.